And so growing up in a small town, I got to see the best and the worst aspects of that. The best thing about being in a small town is that everybody knows who you are. And sometimes the worst thing about being in a small town is that everybody knows who you are. And so I got to grow up in that environment. But at the same time, it was a house full of, like I said, we were short on money, but full on love. And it made me, hopefully, the person I am today. I think I learned lessons from that childhood that still stay with me and resonate with me, and things that I try to talk about in my writing.
Virginia is a very diverse state, if not one of the most diverse states in the Union. The difference between Northern Virginia and Southwestern Virginia, it's like different planets almost. How does this diversity affect your writing? Why do you choose Virginia? Is that diversity part of why you choose to set your books in this state?
Yeah, I think if you're gonna write about the South, you have to write about it in a full and honest way. Virginia, Richmond used to be the capital of the Confederacy, but now Richmond is one of the most diverse, most progressive cities in the country. And so I was just saying in the green room, Richmond was a very different city when I was a kid. And like we would come up here to the flood zone or come up here, yeah, I didn't see people that know. And so it's like my uncle would say places where like you could catch death like a cold. And it's really changed and gotten a lot more progressive, a lot more artistically driven. But for me as a writer, all those aspects, the changing in Richmond, the way Northern Virginia sort of become its own metropolitan area, how the time seems to be slowing down in the rural areas, in the counties, like going out toward Buena Vista or down toward Suffolk. And so all of that, I think, creates a very interesting, complex and conflict of ideas that I can use in my writing to tell good stories. I mean, I'm from a small town, but I've lived in the city part of Virginia. I've gotten to travel now. And so the sort of way Virginia both is similar to all across the country, but also very unique and unto itself is something that really drives me as a writer. I think there's a plethora of stories that can be told about our state that maybe aren't being told. A lot of times, the only time you see Virginia in popular entertainment is when somebody's trying to fake Vancouver. And it's like, oh, this is Virginia because this is a CIA story. It's like, none of those trees are Virginia. So it's like, so for me, it's like, it's important to be a native son and talk about and share the stories of where I come from, but also use Virginia sort of as a symbol of the way that we need to change as a society moving forward.
Yeah, we were talking in the green room. I said, I'm old enough to remember watching the Ramones play at ECU in 1978 and almost watch Iggy Pop implode at the mosque in 1981. Now, your debut novel, Blacktop Wasteland, it received much critical acclaim, not just for a debut novel, but just as a novel. So it was a remarkable first effort. But it is a very complex and violent story. What inspired you to write this particular story? What was the germ of the idea for this book?
So it's a couple things. There's two things. So back in 2015, I wrote a short story for a magazine called Thug Lit, and we didn't know at the time that was the last issue of Thug Lit. And so my story was the last story in the last issue of this magazine that for 10 years had been one of the few magazines you could read hard crime stories in. So that story was called Slant Six, and it featured a character named Bug, and it was telling the story of his daddy's car. And so that story always kind of kept rattling around in my head for years. So then I wrote a novel called My Darkest Prayer, and I got picked up by an agent, and I thought, wow, I've got an agent now, we're gonna pop champagne bottles, it's gonna be great. And it didn't work out like that. Nobody wanted that book. We got like 63 rejections. And my agent would always forward them to me, and I was like, after like 10, I was like, you can stop sending me these. I did it. But
did you save them all? Did you save them?
I saved all of them, yeah. And when Blacktop Wasteland got picked up, I burned them. But I did. I went out back in the barrel and set them on fire, printed them out and set them on fire. But anyway, that agent was trying to sell Darkest Prayer and he couldn't. And after a while, he said, look, I'm not leaving you, but you need to come back with something different. I'm like, all right, whatever. So so we separated, went our separate ways. And in the interim, I sold Darkest Prayer myself to a small publishing firm out of Maryland called Entry Publishing. And while I was waiting for that to get produced, I saw, because they had asked for a lot of changes, which was fine. It's like nobody else wanted the book. I was very willing to make the changes they need to make. But it's like Stephen King says, it's the same book, but it ain't Boss. It ain't got all the bells and whistles. So anyway, I was sitting at home watching, I think it was American Masters, and they had an episode with Bruce Springsteen. And Bruce Springsteen was talking about when he wrote Born to Run. And to paraphrase, he had had 2 other albums that had done okay. He figured that the company was going to cut him loose, that they owed him some studio time. He says, you know, I went in there and I just wrote songs that were about everything I wanted to talk about, which was cars and summertime and girls and trying to find your way as a man. And I remember thinking to myself, that's the kind of book I want to write. I want to write about cars and the South and summer nights and moonshine and what it means to be an African American living. I live 35 minutes from the former capital Confederacy. And that's where Black Tie Wasteland came. And I never thought anybody would want to publish it, let alone read it. And then fast forward 3 months, I go to a writing convention and I meet this editor. I meet this agent named Josh Gessler. And we were talking and he said, hey, send me what you're working on. I want to see what you're working on. I sent a Black Tie Wasteland and that sort of changed my life. You know, Black Tie Wasteland is really a love letter to where I come from, to the town I come from, the way I grew up. All my cousins loved fast cars growing up. They all drove a lot. We used to have drag races out on Route 17 at night. But it's also like a letter to, you know, the little boy I was. And me and my father, like I said, my father and mother were separated very early. I didn't have a great relationship with my dad all the time, but we were able to work through it, and I'm glad that we have a good relationship now. And so it's sort of a letter to all those lost little boys who don't know how to communicate, who don't know how to articulate what they're feeling inside. And the fact that people love it and that people connected with it the way they did is an incredible blessing. And I'm so honored that people did.
I believe I remember hearing you wrote your first story at age 5.
Yeah, so yeah. So my mom, God rest her soul, but she used to tell the story that apparently when she would read me fairy tales that I would complain about them. And I would like pick out the plot inconsistencies and stuff. So like she was like saying like she read me the 3 Little Pigs, and you know they built one house out of straw, one house out of sticks, and then they built the last house out of bricks. And apparently I asked her why didn't they build the first house out of bricks in the first place. And so her solution for that was to tell me to write my own story. And so if you write your own story, you write it any way you want. You can make it make sense. And because I was complaining that they didn't make sense. So I wrote the story at 5.5, almost 6, about these these gnomes in a rocket ship that land in our backyard. And I remember showing it to my mother, and she kept asking me, "Did you write this all by yourself?" I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "Nobody helped you?" I'm like, "No." And there's something about that story. It's a terrible story, but it really makes no sense. Narrative is just all over the place. But the look on her face when she realized that I had read it or wrote it by myself, there's this, it's like it's this high that I'm chasing. Like I want that feeling again. Because the feeling of her look on her face was like she was proud of me for something I had created. This wasn't something I had taken from somebody else or made up from someone else. It was something that came organically out of me. And that's when I started. That's when I fell in love with writing, because I saw the effect that it had on somebody, and I wanted that. I wanted to feel that again. So
fascinating. I want to jump ahead to Razor Blade Tears. This is my favorite of your novels, by the way. You explore very complex themes of identity, redemption, family in this book. I wanted you to share some insights into the inspirations of this book and how you approached these themes.
So I had a family member who's a member of the LGBTQ community, and they had been hiding it for a long time. And we were about the same age. And so finally one time they told me, "Hey, I'm coming home this summer. I'm coming to family reunion. I'm gonna be honest about who I am. I'm gonna tell mom and dad. This person's mom and dad was my aunt and uncle." And they were like, "Hey, are you gonna be there? I really can use the support." I was like, "Yeah, I'll be there." So we were there, and it didn't go well. And then afterwards, it really didn't go well. Afterwards, me and my brother took this person out for a drink, and they said something that really stuck with me. They said, "You know, maybe I should just kept it to myself. I shouldn't have said anything." And it just struck me like, how would it feel for the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally and want you to be happy, not love you unconditionally and call your happiness an abomination? And so that was sort of the inspiration. And then I had another situation where I had a friend of mine, we were lifting weights, we were out working out, and he was trying to lift some weight and he couldn't do it. And he said, "You know, I never thought it'd be a day when I couldn't do this and that." And it made me think about being men of a certain age and the mistakes that we made and things that we wish we could go back and change. So it's a book about grief. It's a book about trauma. It's a book about toxic masculinity, homophobia. But it's also a book about time. You know, time, we all think we have enough time, but we don't. And so it's like you have to say the things that are important now and hopefully live in a way that you don't have that many regrets. We're all going to have some regrets, but hopefully you live in a way where you don't have a regret and don't have a regret for something you did to someone that you can't apologize to. And so that was sort of the genesis of the book. And you know, it sort of came from really a place of me being frustrated with the way people judge other people, you know, for who they love. And so that's sort of where the book came from. But I didn't want to tell it through the voice of an LGBTQ person, one, because I'm not a part of that community, but two, that's not the story I'm trying to tell. It's not the story of an LGBTQ person finding their path. It's the story of the people who love them finding their path and their way to redemption. So that's why it's told through Ike and Buddy Lee.
Your protagonists in both of these books, both Montage and Ike Randolph, certainly are multidimensional, even deeply flawed characters. Tell us, how do you develop these flawed characters and keep us interested? Why would we want to keep liking these people in the face of their sometimes violent and sudden urges?
So for me, I always want to write about a character that I would find interesting. And when I start with a book, when I start with a character, what is it they want? And if what they want is, because what you want is not just monetary, it's not just materialism. Like with Bug, yeah, he wants money for his family, he wants money for his daughter and his sons and his wife. But what he really wants is security. What he really wants is safety. But he's a man who's been built in such a way, he doesn't know how to ask these things, so he tries to take them. And by taking them, they have all these consequences that come along. With Ike, it's like, what does Ike really want? You know, he wants to run his business. At the beginning of the book, he wants to be left alone. But really what he wants is forgiveness. And he can't get it because his son is dead. And so now how do you process that? You know, how do you work with that? There's a TV show, you know, you don't think of, sometimes, I mean, I think of this way, but a lot of people don't think of comic book TV shows and movies having anything insightful to say. But there's a TV show called WandaVision. And there's a character that says in that TV show, what is grief but love persevering? And so for Ike, that's what it is. His grief is really an expression of the love that he had for his son, but now it's too late to tell him. And so because it's too late to tell him, he's going to get revenge for who took him from him. But all that comes back to him wanting forgiveness. So I think if you've got a bad character, but they're doing good things, that can draw you in and that can make you fall in love sort of with that character. It's so funny you said that because, like, so every Mother's Day, I think it's funny to post this clip on this movie called 3:10 in Yuma, starring Russell Crowe and Christian Bale. And Russell Crowe plays an outlaw. And there's a police officer or deputy in this movie who all moving along is making fun of Russell Crowe's mother, making fun of his mother, saying really rude things. Finally, Russell Crowe gets loose, and as he's about to throw him off the cliff, he whispers in his ear, "Even bad men love their mamas." And I posted that and I said, I think Bug would agree with that sentiment. I got so many people on social media that were like, Bug is not a bad man. Don't say that about him. You know, how dare you? And I'm like, have you read the book? Because he killed like 9 people. I mean, like, I like him. He's charismatic. He's interesting, but I wouldn't say he's good. But that showed me that formula works because I took a bad man and I made people care about him because what he wanted outside of the money, outside of the exhilaration, was that security. And people understand that they can identify with it, and they identify with him going through the struggle trying to get it.
It's like the old I think they called it the American grotesque genre from years ago, where people had finding themselves trying to claw their way up out of a hole somehow, or die trying. You know, and they don't always make it. They don't always survive.
Exactly.
What strikes me about all your books, but especially Razorblade Tears, is the honesty and the authenticity of the dialogue. Whether you've got black men refued in a barbershop, you've got white gangbangers going back and forth in a holdout, you've got a black protagonist and a white protagonist whose gay sons were married and were murdered, who are forced together, and the dialogue between them. Tell us how you create such honest and authentic dialogue.
That's a great question.
What sources do you draw on, for example?
I'm nosy, so I listen to people's conversations. I'm serious, like among the horrific things that came out of the pandemic, but one of the things, the more lighthearted things that I really missed was just being in a bar and listening to people talk, listening to snippets of conversation, listening to the way dialogue actually works in real life, the way people cut each other off or cut across stories, the way some people will defer to a person that is, quote unquote, the social leader of that group. The way stories kind of begin and end with no resolution. I remember sitting in a bar and I heard this woman talking to this other woman about this iguana. And just like, I told him, if he lets that goddamn iguana off the porch again, It's gonna be me and him. I'm telling you that right now. And I had to get up and leave because my friends were leaving. And I've always wondered, like, what happened to the iguana? Who is him and why is he letting this iguana run across the street? And so you take those ideas and you make the dialogue be representative of the situation. Dialogue is not just for expository purposes. Dialogue defines characters. So the way characters talk, like, excuse me, but I don't believe that you should have to have like attribution tags on your dialogue. You should know who's talking without me saying John said or William said. And so for me, I try to think about the character and then how does that dialogue express that character. So like with Ike is he thinks a lot. He's a very deep thinker, but he's a taciturn person. He's reticent to talk. He doesn't really like being around other people. So his dialogue is very fast and very clipped. Whereas Buddy Lee doesn't like being alone. He likes being around people. He's very gregarious. Even though he's a man that's committed violence, he is someone who loves to have a good time because having a good time allows him not to think about the things that hurt him. So his dialogue is very funny with jokes because he wants to keep the dialogue moving. He doesn't want to stay still long enough to think about missing his son, to think about missing his marriage. And so that's the way I attribute all the characters their dialogue, even like side characters, like the kid in the bakery. You know, he's just a kid in the bakery working. But in my mind, I think about him being 23 years old. It's Thursday night. He doesn't want to be there at work anymore. He's ready to go. He's got a date. He's ready to go hang out. And so how does he talk to his character? Trying to get him out the bakery. Trying to talk to them fast. So that's how you use dialogue. For me, the reality of the honesty of the dialogue just comes from the people I was raised around, the people I grew up around, the way they talk. You know, I think there is a certain theatricality to Southern talk sometimes. The way we speak, when we use colloquialism, it's like there's this great love of language in the South. And so I try to represent that in the books. Even in a quiet person like Ike, there's still that Southern colloquialism that comes through, or when with Ike, when he's threatening somebody, he like to tell somebody, don't, if I see you around here one more time, there won't be enough left of you to put in the Ziploc bag. That's a Southern colloquialism, that's a Southern threat that you should take seriously.
The ticking time bomb comes to mind.
Exactly.
Okay, so you got these themes of race, sexuality, and prejudice in Razor Blade Tears. What do you want the reader to take away? What's one thing you would want the reader to take away from reading that book and about those themes?
That love is love. And it's more important that the people in your life are loved than who is loving them. That's the main thing. It really is, and I think you think that's an important thing right now. And I trust me, I swear to you, it is not. It is not the most important thing. The most important thing is having the people that you love in your life.
Amen to that. Yeah, seriously. There are so many moments in your novels that just knock me out of my chair. But there's one in particular in Razor Blade Tears, and I would like you to read it. It is a scene where Ike and Buddy Lee are in Ike's truck. And Ike is a business owner, and he drives a dually, a fairly late model truck. And Buddy Lee makes the comment that, well, maybe they could trade places. So I'd like you to read that exchange because it is quite a searing exchange between Ike and Buddy Lee.
So this is Buddy Lee starting. Do I get the truck? If I get the truck, hell yeah, I'll switch places with you, Buddy Lee said. He let out a little chuckle. Oh, you get the truck, but you also get pulled over 4 or 5 times a month because there ain't no way your black ass can afford a nice truck like this, right? You get the truck, but you get followed around a jewelry store because you probably fitting to rob the place, right? You can get the truck, but you got to deal with white ladies clutching their purses when you walk down the street because Fox News had told them that you come to steal their money and their virtue. You get the truck, then you got to explain to some trigger-happy cop that no, Mr. Officer, you're not resisting arrest. You get the truck, but then you also get 2 in the back of the head because you reached for your cell phone and he thought it was a gun, Ike said. He glanced at Buddy Lee. So you still want to trade places? Buddy Lee swallowed real hard, turned his head toward the window, but didn't say a word.
Yeah, growing up in the South, I assume. Now, when I see the words red onion in your books, I recoil. I've got a little bit of experience. Are y'all familiar with Red Onion? The prison, the level 5 maximum security prison in Southwest Virginia. Couple things about Red Onion I want to add for context. So when you read about it in the book, you know what this is. Red Onion is a level 5 Supermax facility in Wise County that the staff and all the corrections officers are all white. The entire inmate population is all black and brown. Red Onion and its companion Supermax prison, Wallens Ridge, just over the mountain in Pound, are the largest black communities west of the Blue Ridge. I think that is a very sobering thought. I correspond with several inmates or in prisons around Virginia. And one friend of mine, Rashid, just emailed me the other day. He's been transferred again back to Red Onion after enduring 42 sessions of radiation for prostate cancer. And they sent him there in what they call a Freddie Gray van, which is a van with steel benches that they're shackled to and they can't lay down, and they have to sit up for 8 straight hours. And then they put him in what they call the B3 torture unit, which is one of the lower levels, more segregation levels of Red Onion. It is a bad place. And another young inmate there was just recently attacked by attack dogs. He was attacked in the groin, and it took 2 operations and 46 stitches to reattach everything. So it is bad news down there. So you've got the white power structure with the black inmate population. It is a vestige of Jim Crow that the Virginia Department of Corrections can't seem to do away with. Do you have any insight on Red Onion?
So the reason I included Red Onion, and I had a relative who did some time there, and he was telling me how bad it was and how horrible it was. And I wanted to show that even in their incarceration, Buddy Lee and Ike have different levels of experiences that they've had. You know, so I had Buddy Lee do his time in Mecklenburg, and I had Ike do his on Red Onion. And so even in that, because they're both ex-convicts, there's a differentiation between them because of their race, because of their ethnicity, because of their background, that even maybe Buddy Lee doesn't recognize.
Right. Totally different experiences, even in incarceration. Jumping ahead to your last novel, All the Sinners Bleed, what was the influence of the George Floyd murder and the resulting BLM movement in the creation of that book?
So originally when I started that book, it was gonna be about a George Floyd type murder. And one thing is, on a personal level, I realized rather early on, I really just had too much, I was too emotionally close to the issue to give the issue the due diligence it needs. You know, nobody wants to read a 300-page sermon, and it just kept leading, felt like I was leading up to that. And so I decided to take a step back, reevaluate what I was trying to say, what I was trying to do with this book. What I really wanted to say was, you know, what does it look like when the people who are supposed to protect us can't? You know, and what does it look like when the people who are supposed to protect us are the ones hurting us? And how do you deal with that? What kind of person are you? You know, Walter Mosley has this great saying that he says, everybody thinks they have morals until they're morally tested. And so I wanted to create a character, which ended up being this Titus Crown, who does have morals, who's trying to do the right thing, but ultimately realizes that doing the right thing in an unjust society rarely works. It really helps you, you know. And so what happens in the course of the book, basically All Sinners Bleed is about a small town called Sharon County and on the Chesapeake Bay in Virginia, and it's elected their first black sheriff, Titus Grant. And he really ran because he wanted to change the way the police force there dealt with black people, with people of lower economic class, all the people that are the least of us that you should look out for. He's a former FBI agent who retired, got burnt out, came home to take care of his daddy who just had a good replacement. And so for me, the book really is about that person who's trying to be morally upright, that person who's trying to do the right thing, and what happens when they find that the institution they're trying to fix is maybe unsavable. Like Titus trying to change the police force, trying to change the justice system. It's like if you bought a house and you painted the walls, you put new scaffolding up, you fixed the roof, and you made it look aesthetically pleasing, but the foundation is rotten. You're doing all this work for something that can't stand on its own. And so for Titus, yes, the book is about him tracking down a serial killer who's been using the small town as a dumping ground, but it's also about him learning about himself, learning that you can't fix everything, you can't save everybody. So that's sort of where it came from. But I'll still talk about issues, police corruption, police violence, racism within police forces, how religion affects small towns. There's a lot going on in All Sinners Bleed. It's sort of like almost like a untethered trilogy because it's sort of saying everything I want to say about certain aspects of not just Virginia, but the South in general.
Yeah, you hit a lot of really contemporary topics. And so we've got the school shooting. We've got, children murdered. I mean, there's some bad stuff going on in this town.
Yeah, it's a dark place. It's like one of the ministers says, that it's time for cheering season of pain. And I think, that we who don't, if we don't study history, then we repeat it. And I think you can see that right now. You can see like things going on right now where it feels like we're going back 35, 40 years instead of moving forward. And same thing with Titus. He wants to make the police force a more equitable police force. He's a sheriff. He's trying to treat everybody fairly. But again, what he finds out is it's hard to do the right thing when the system is working the way it's supposed to. But like you said, the violence and the darkness in it, for me, I think artistically, I wanted Titus to be a really strong character. And you can't find out whether a character is strong or not until you throw things at him, It's like somebody said to me one time, writing is putting a character in a tree and throwing rocks at him. And I think that's true. You see what your characters can take. And for me, I was proud that Titus ended up being the kind of character who could take anything I threw at him. Not without injury and not without second guessing himself, but he's able to keep pushing through. He's able to keep moving forward without letting life knock him down and staying down. There's an old Asian proverb that get knocked down 7, get up 8. And so I think Titus definitely exemplifies that.
Yeah, the George Floyd murder and the Black Lives Matter movement had a profound aspect on my work because those all came together with the removal of the Confederate monuments and Governor Ralph Northam's blackface scandal. All those things coalesced and led us to abolish the death penalty because all of a sudden everybody could see the racial inequities, the disparity of the police against the Black community. So it played a large role with us as well.
Yeah, I mean, like in the book, Titus is very aware of that. He does his best to make sure that his deputies, that he's hired deputies who don't have racial bias, that he's trying to do the best for the communities in that small town that haven't always been protected. They've been assaulted sometimes by the police force. What Titus learns, though, is difficult because there is such a history of trauma in the Black community, especially in small towns. Like I remember being pulled over at 16 and my buddy being 17, ostensibly for speeding, but really because my buddy had gotten a brand new car for his birthday. And so the cop could not believe that 2 young Black men were driving around in like a 2000 Mitsubishi Galant, with nice rims. And so Titus finds himself sort of a pariah in many ways. The Black community is justifiably worried of him. Even though he's a Black man, he's still wearing a police uniform. And then in a small town, the white community doesn't like him because they don't like the fact he's a Black man wearing a police uniform. And so he finds himself sort of as no man's land. But again, he still endeavors to do the right thing. He still endeavors to treat people with equality, to treat people equally. He thinks that if he treats everybody the same, then the Justice Department will do it. And what he learns, even as he's chasing a serial killer, is that his equanimity has no effect on what happens later to these people. And he learns that sort of the hard way through this serial killer who challenges him about his religion, about his ideas about sociology, about his ideas about liberty. And so for me, I like to think of him as sort of this errant knight, and he's moving through the darkness trying to fix as much as he can. And no knight with unblemished armor is a knight that's truly been tested. And for Titus as a Black man, as an African-American growing up in the South, there are moments where he feels incredible rage. There's a scene in the book where a kid has spray painted the Confederate statue in this town. And then some people are gathered around the kid and they want to beat him up. And Titus is trying to be very equal to these folks. But then he has to, I think any Black person in here knows that moment where you're trying to talk to someone, you're trying to deal with them, they're not respected, you can tell it's because of your race, and you have to have this moment where you look them in the eye and you let them know that that's what this is about. And Titus has to have that moment. You have to have that moment where it's like you're talking to this person, but what you're really saying, there's only so much more of this shit I'm gonna take. And so he has that moment with these folks, and he has to do that a lot. And really, it's exhausting to him. You see him in the book coming home, his dad's always worried he's not getting enough sleep. But it's being a sheriff, having that badge is a symbol of power, but it also puts a target on it.
You made some interesting choices in that book with the names of communities. Charlton County, of course, is a fictitious county. But other cities and towns have their real Virginia names. We see Richmond, we see Carytown, we see these other places. What drives your choices in renaming Community. Is it to protect the innocent?
Protect innocent and guilty. So, well, I did that at first because all my towns, no matter the name, it's all Matthews County. It's all my hometown. It's all where I come from. But I was like, I didn't want anybody to get mad at me, so I changed the name. But the funny thing is, everybody wants to be in the books. Everybody wants to be in the book. And I'm like, are you sure you want to be in one of my books? Because you tend to get shot in the face a lot. You're like, yeah, shoot me in the face. I'll put you in there. But I wanted to use that as a sort of a, because you have an imaginary town, you can shape it the way you want. You shape the politics, the history. I didn't have to be bound by the actual historical record. That being said, I wanted people to know that this is a town on the Middle Peninsula. So Richmond is 30 minutes to the north, and Norfolk is 45 minutes to the south, and you can make it to Maryland in 3.5 hours and go 17 through Tappahannock. I wanted to create this sort of awareness of the atmosphere of the surrounding cities. I used to work at a funeral home, and one of the things we had to do sometimes was to go to the medical examiner building out on Fifth, and pick up a body. And so I wanted to sort of show like how that is this sort of unassuming building right in the middle of the city where you can see the most horrific stuff ever. Like there's nothing in my book that is as bad as some of the stuff I saw picking up my body there. So you got nothing to worry about there.
Yikes. Okay. Southern literature, as we all know, has a very rich tradition. I mean, William Faulkner, Harper Lee, O'Connor. How do you see your work fitting into this canon of Southern literature? Do you see yourself as a Southern Gothic writer?
I mean, first of all, I don't know if I fit in the canon of Faulkner and O'Connor. That's a heady room there. I think for me, All the Sinners Bleed is probably my first true Southern Gothic novel. For me, Southern Gothic is the idea that the past and the past sins of the South manifest themselves in this sort of existential malaise in the story. So when you read Faulkner, Yalabad County, or you read about something like Light in August, all the stuff that happens in the South, that happens in those books, is because we've never dealt with the original sin of the South, which is slavery, and how it affects. To me, there's 4 pillars of Southern Gothic fiction. There's race, class, sex, and religion. And what also I try to talk about all of those. I talk about how they affect us, how religion can be both a cudgel and a crutch for folks, how race both divides us, but also how it can unite communities. How sex is looked upon, and how, people that go to church, sex and religion are inextricably tied. Same people that go to church every Sunday and tell you that you're a sinner are the same people that can be sneaking around with the minister's wife, the deacon's husband. And so how those things, that sort of hypocrisy that exists. Speaking of Flannery O'Connor, one of the things I take from her, she had this quote one time, somebody asked her, do you think the South is Christ-centered? And she kind of laughed, and she's like, I don't know if it's Christ-centered, but it's definitely Christ-haunted. And I think it is. It's haunted by hypocrisy. For a region that's called the Bible Belt, that's supposed to be so much infused with the ideas and principles of Christianity, there are places that in the South that you couldn't find any place that is less about brotherhood, less about charity than places in the South. People that call themselves Christian, but they don't remember the parable of the Good Samaritan. They don't remember the parable of the woman by the well. They treat people in such a polarizing way, but yet they're the same people that will go to church every Sunday, hoot and holler and shout and say that they praise Jesus. I think some people think Jesus is, looks like someone who goes to a country club. If they saw real Jesus, they wouldn't let him in the house. And so I talk about all that in my work. I think All Sinners Bleed is the book that I really sort of had all that coalesce. So where do I find myself? Where do I think of myself? I don't know if I'm in that pantheon, but I definitely am someone who's inspired by it. And I definitely hope that when people read it, they enjoy come for the serial killer, but stay for the social commentary. Yeah.
What writers do you identify with? This Cormac McCarthy came to mind. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
I'm a huge Cormac McCarthy fan. I mean, I did my college dissertation on Out of Dark, so I love Cormac McCarthy. I was inspired by, of course, Walter Mosley, Dan Zane, Elmore Leonard, Toni Morrison, I spoke about earlier. One of the writers that really helped me, though, as a professional, become a professional writer, was Daniel Woodrell, who wrote Winter's Bone, Tomato Red, a really great writer who's centered in Appalachia. And the thing that it made me realize, reading his book and seeing the movie Winter's Bone, is that I can tell stories about the people and places that I come from. When I first started writing, a lot of publishers were like, there was a big movement in African-American fiction for street lit. Everybody was writing, stories that were set in DC or New York or Chicago, Philadelphia, about gangsters, about their women, and so on and so forth. And so editors will try to get me to write, like shift my, well, I like the story, but can you sit it in Philadelphia? And I'm like, well, no, it happens in Virginia. So that's where the story is. And so I was getting real discouraged, but I met an agent who helped me get that book out there. And I think it's interesting now that people see that this area of the state, of the country, I should say, has so many different stories it can tell, that they're not, the South is not just the region, the sole providence of like neo-Confederate apologists. There's a huge African-American community in the South, a huge indigenous community in the South. The East Bay Cherokees in North Carolina going down into Georgia. So there's all types of cultures here. I think some people think or thought that if you're an African-American person living in the South, that you sort of exist in this sort of submissive bubble, and nothing could be further from the truth. I grew up, like I said, I grew up 35, 40 minutes from Richmond. I grew up in a real small town. I've had somebody call me, the N-word to my face 5 or 6 times, and I whoop their ass all 5 or 6 times. Because I think it takes a certain level of physical, but also an incredible amount of personal will to live someplace that your great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents were kept as property. To not only live in this place and survive, but thrive and claim it as your own. I say this all the time, but Southern heritage is not just this 4-year hissy fit that was the Civil War. It is everything that comes with being in the South. It's the natural world, it's community, it's sociologically relevant causes, the civil rights movement born out of Selma. It's all those things. And if you're somebody that thinks the only heritage is, Jeb Stuart and Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson, then you're really missing the vast majority of what makes the South unique and what makes the South special. And so I think for me, the thing that I feel is my bigger responsibility is to tell stories about the South that rearrange and reconfigure the way you view it. That it's not just, the Dukes of Hazzard. It's not just somebody who's, anti-woke person. It's about the people who live here. It's about the people who live in these woods, on these dirt roads, coming up 64, people who live in this state. Like you said, because people that live in Northern Virginia still have relatives that live down in the coast and out in the Shenandoah Valley. And people that live in the Shenandoah Valley have kids who want to tell stories about where they come from, who realize they have to leave that place, but always take that place with them. And so that's the thing for me that makes the South unique, and the thing that I want to write about. And being a part of that sort of pantheon is important to me. People will tell you that, people in the 1920s, 1930s, they were racist because they didn't know any better. When you read something by like Light in August, by William Faulkner, which is about a mixed race Black man, you realize that puts a lot of that. Because here's William Faulkner, who was born on a plantation, giving voice to the frustrations of someone who finds themselves not welcome in either world. So I think that's definitely a part of the South. I think the South is this place that is the original storyteller of the entire country. And the story of the United States can't be told without telling the story of the South. And I think in many ways, because we haven't really dealt with the sins that are committed here, it keeps driving us to have to reevaluate it and reinterrogate it. And I know not just myself, but a lot of Southern writers now, Jesmond Moore, Eli Craner, folks like that, who are doing that on a grand scale. I'm just glad to be a part of that.
And it's really a big switch because, like, with boomers like myself, many of us of this age, like Governor Northam admitted, we grew up with these history books that were written in 1948 by segregationists here in Virginia. And the only women in these books were Martha Washington and Pocahontas. And there were no Blacks in the books. So we grew up learning that Virginia was settled, everything was done by white men. So I see these people you're talking about, along with yourself, contributing to changing this whole mindset. What do you hope in the future people to look at the what you've added to this Southern tradition with your writing?
I hope they'll realize how much I love the South. I truly do. How much I love where I come from, how much it means to me to be a Southerner, to be a Black Southerner. When I was a kid, used to feel ashamed of that. Used to feel ashamed to say you were a Black Southerner, because, like you said, the books I had, and I was going to school in the '80s, but I was still getting books that called Civil War, the War of Northern Aggression. That would tell you, Robert E. Lee, he's really this kind-hearted gentleman who happened to own slaves, and nothing could be further from the truth. And so I hope that when people look at my books, they see the great love and respect I have for the region, but also they'll see the honesty that I approach it. To paraphrase James Baldwin, I love the South. I love being a Southerner. But I think because I love it, I am required to tell the truth about it, to make it face its own shortcomings, because I know what it can be. I know it can be better than what it is. And I just want to be a part of trying to make that happen.
your genre has been described as thrilling crime. Does that sound right, or is there something else?
Nah, I'm okay with that. I mean,
Okay.
I was at the it was funny, I'll tell y'all a story, but you gotta keep it among us, don't tell nobody. I was at the Texas Book Festival over the weekend, and I went to a cocktail party. It was like a welcoming reception for writers, you know. And I guess I got there a little early, so I'm walking around, they give me name tags, and I'm just introducing myself to people. And it was like a bunch of like quote unquote literary writers, and it was so snooty. And I was like, oh, you write what? Oh, I'm not a genre fan, or I'm not familiar with your work, or all of a sudden it's bleed. That sounds rather pulpy. There's still a market for that. Oh, yeah. And yeah. And so my mama told me, you know, don't, if you ain't got nothing nice to say, don't say nothing at all. So I kept it moving, and I ran into these other writers, and I ran into a writer that I know, and I was telling them that, and they were like, "Oh, they just jealous. That's all. They know who you are. Like, you've been on TV twice this year. You know."
You're on NPR.
Yeah,
NPR.
And so, but I think there is this attitude among certain writers and certain readers that crime fiction, crime genre is not as artistically important, it's not as artistically relevant as, say, quote unquote, literary novels. But I think every great literary novel has aspects of a crime novel. There's even a novel called Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky that is literally about crime and the effects of it. I think the thing about crime fiction that appeals to me is that no matter who you are, no matter where you are, I can write something in a crime fiction novel that will relate to you. Like, you may read a novel by Philip Roth and can't relate to being, you know, an Upper West Side professor at a humanities college. But if I write something in one of my books about pain, if I write some of my books about not being able to pay a bill, you can understand that, because we've all experienced desperation, right? You may read, you know, an old book, like say something like McKee by Frank Norris or Tess of the D'Urbervilles. You may not have grown up on a, you know, a spooky Gothic plantation in Northern England, but you will understand Tessa's need to be a part of something to solve this mystery that exists around her. And so I think for me, I always like to say crime fiction is like the gospel of the dispossessed. It's the gospel of the lost. And for me, it's the most acceptable genre to talk about the things that I find important. You know, toxic masculinity, human, you know, the existential cause of being a human being. You know, talking about race and class and religion. I'm not ashamed to be a crime writer, because I think crime fiction, you know, people like to joke about popular fiction. Well, popular fiction is popular because people like it. And so, if I could tell you, like I said again, I bring you in. The honey is the car chase, is the revenge novel, is the mystery, but the medicine is talking about all the things that you said, you know, talking about socially relevant themes. And I think no other genre does that with as much panache and as much verve as crime fiction does.
Well, yeah, you've certainly captured that. And I got to tell you, when I picked up All the Sinners Bleed, I thought of that very thing about the literary thing pops up. You start out the book with 2 pages of exposition about Charlton County before you even start the novel. And I was thinking that would get you drummed out of any MFA creative writing workshop, you know. So but he's S.A. Cosby, he can get away with doing that.
Well, I stole that from Dennis Lehane. Dennis Lehane writes this incredible prologue for Targets Take My Hand, and it's so beautiful. But it also really sets the stage. When you read that prologue, you realize something terrible happened to these people. Something monumentally life-changing. There's somebody they mentioned who's left town. So whatever they went through, it must have been incredible. And so when it came time to write All the Sinners Bleed, I wanted to give you that feeling about Titus. I wanted to almost make it feel mythic, you know? And so to bring it back to the history of Sharon and talk about everything that started since it was founded in 1803, go right down to what happened with Titus. It's almost like if you don't want to find out what happened, then you don't want to read. You're not a reader. And so that's what I wanted to use that to bring you in. And for me, I wanted to, again, set the table. I want you to realize, you know, the stuff in these pages is dark, and it can be scary, but you have someone in Titus who's going to hold your hand, and he's going to take you through the darkness to the light.
Yeah, beautiful. We were talking a little bit in the green room about your writing process. I know you like to sit in a market lounger, but talk about what are the rituals or habits or strategies that keep you productive and creative?
I think I'm naturally a very inquisitive person. So I'm always reading. I read all the time. I got a Kindle because I have no room left for books. I was the last holdout for a Kindle, man. I love holding on to real books, but it's like I have literally no room. My cat keeps knocking them over, and so I was like, I gotta get a Kindle. But I love to read, and a lot of times when I read all genres. I don't just read crime fiction. Like, I read historical novels. I read romance novels. I just finished reading a romance novel called Before I Let You Go by Kennedy Ryan. It was a really great book. Got to meet her over the weekend. She's a real nice person. So I read a lot outside of my genre. Because I think as a writer, you have to keep trying to improve yourself, and you have to like know the things that you're weak about and know the things you're strong about. And so the things I'm weak about, I feel like sometimes I want to make my female characters stronger. I want to make them have more agency. So I read about different female characters in different female-led books. But as far as the actual writing process, so I do. This is not it, but I have a lucky hat that I write in. And I have the like you said, the recliner. My first thing that I bought with my very first like actual like big time royalty check was I got me and my daddy matching recliner. So it's like he needs it because he was a fisherman for 40 years. He gets a bad back. So I got his recliner with the heater and everything, the cooler and stuff. But I like to have my hat on. I put my earphones on because I love to listen to music when I write. If I'm getting to the end of a book, if I'm about to finish a book, I do have like a special little bottle of whiskey that I pour when I know I'm going to finish the book. Like if this is the day I'm going to write the end, I'll drink that little glass of whiskey before I start. Other than that, I think I find inspiration. I'm a very visual person, so believe it or not, I go on Pinterest a lot, and I go on Pinterest and I'll type in Southern Gothic aesthetic, or I'll type in father and sons, or I'll type in like when I was doing alternate bleed, black police officer, black sheriff, black lawman, and those images that come up, I'll write little vignettes about them. A lot of times they don't make it into the book, but it sort of gives me this sort of almost emotional resonance about what the story is about. I love like side characters and that have it, like again, because I love listening to people talk. I love side characters that weave in and out of a story that have their own separate adventure that you might want to like, what's going on with that guy? What's going on with that person? And so I think those visuals help me create those stories, those narratives. Like you can see something in the back of a picture. Well, I see what's up here in the foreground, but what's going on over there? I love trying to do that with my work. When I start a book, I write myself a synopsis. I don't write an outline. It's just a synopsis, just me telling myself the story. Here's this black sheriff who's come home. What's going on with him? Well, he's trying to solve a serial killer murder. Well, why is he doing that? Oh, because he found out about it. So it's me talking to myself a little bit. That can usually be anywhere from 2 to 3 pages. That's sort of like a guide, a roadmap for when I write the book. A lot of times the book ends up very differently than the synopsis, but it still gives me sort of my footing. It gives me a direction as to where I want to go. I said I have a problem I think some writers have, that I have a whole bunch of ideas and not enough time to write them all. So I have a Google Doc that I use. It's on my phone too. So when I come up with an idea like, oh, this would be interesting, or if I see something, like I've been traveling a lot. So if I see an interesting image, I'll take a picture of it, like, oh, maybe I'll write a story about that later, or that'll make its way in the book. Other than that, I'm probably the laziest writer you'll meet. I don't like doing multiple drafts. I do one rough draft, I send it to the editor, and then I do the developmental edit, and then I'm done. I don't do multiple drafts. For me, it's most fresh the first time. It like the stuff I write down is never as compelling as the way it sounds in my head. So it's hard for me to get that down on the page. But once I get it down, the struggle of getting to here is like I don't want to mess with it anymore. So it's like let's get on with the next thing. So
okay. Are you the next Marvel superhero? Can we talk about Marvel?
I don't think I'm the next one. I'm writing for Marvel. I'm writing a novelization of the Luke Cage character. Okay. Yeah.
Any other new projects coming up?
Yeah. So I'm working on a new book, tentatively titled "The King of Ashes." It's about a family who owns a crematory. He found himself unfortunately involved with some gangsters. I'm working on that now. I'm working on the second book with Questlove. I did a young middle grade book with him last year, early this year, I should say, called The Rhythm of Time, and we're working on part 2 now. What else? I got an 8-episode audio drama for Audible coming out next year that I wrote called Broke Down Profits, so that should be coming out soon. And they're making a movie out of Raised by Tears.
Doesn't sound much like a lazy writer to me. Well, Sean, thank you for coming to see us in Richmond. This has been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot. I'm still an aspiring writer myself. Anything you want to say to any aspiring writers? Especially those from underrepresented backgrounds, what would you say to them?
Somebody told me this, and I'll share this with you. If you're somebody who wants to write, realize there's a story inside you that you're the only person that can tell it. because no one else has lived the life you live. No one else has shared the experiences that you share. And so you're the only one that can tell their story. If you're really a writer, you'll never rest until you are able to tell it.
Great. Sean, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. We're gonna set up a microphone here for anyone who has questions. If you can make it to the mic, please do. Oh, sorry. If not, then raise your hand and a colleague will come and bring a microphone to you.
Anybody got a question? Come on. Don't be shy.
Thank you for coming. This has been amazing.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I wondered, you shared that how with razor blade tears, it was a personal experiences, and we've had similar experiences in my family. What was the reaction from your family and loved ones reading the book? And
Most of them were pretty cool with it.
yeah,
Most of them.
did you know that it was
My cousin who inspired it asked me that. They were like, "Oh man, I really love this, but are you gonna be okay with people back home?" I was like, "I don't care." I think as a writer, you have to be committed to telling the truth. And I actually said it all simply. I had Titus say it. The truth is always in season, and it's evergreen. So I mean, people like it. I get a lot of. So when it came out, I got a lot of weird emails from people that had read Blacktop Wasteland. I got one from a guy. He was like, I was a big fan of yours because you was writing a really manly book, and then you wrote this. I don't know. I don't read your book anymore because I don't want to read about gay sex. And I'm like, I don't know what book you read. There's no gay sex in big tears. So that's a whole personal issue that maybe you need to talk to somebody about. But no, I think if you write and you write as if you're afraid of what people are going to say, you're never going to write the thing that you really should write. Joe Lansdale says you got to write like everybody you know and everybody you're afraid of is dead. And that's the way you write a book. And I take that truly to heart. So thank you for the question. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Joe Lansdale scared the hell out of me.
He's a tough dude.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Great to see you today.
Thank you.
And so setting is everything. Next to character, I think setting probably is. And you talk about these themes and you talk about the sins of the South, which one could argue are the sins of America.
Yep, exactly.
And you also mentioned how a lot of agents wanted you to set this someplace else. How would this book have been different? So you're talking to somebody who relocated like about 4 months ago or so to Richmond from St. Louis, originally from Brooklyn, New York. So I've seen a lot of these different places. And and I was, I got to see Ferguson up close.
Right.
I happened to be there for one of the riots.
Right.
Smelled the tear gas and all
Right.
of that. So could this story, what would happen if you took your protagonist up and put him in Ferguson or in New York or someplace else? How important is it? And does being from the South give you an entirely different, or does it give you the view of America that the country needs?
That's a really good question. I think the book would definitely be different. Like say for instance, All Sinners Bleed, I couldn't write it anywhere else because I needed Titus to be the unquestionable leader of this police force. And if you want to do something that scares the hell out of you, read about how much power sheriffs have in Virginia. There's one interesting thing I learned that technically, according to the Virginia Constitution, the only person that can arrest a sheriff is an equally level elected official. And a lot of times in our communities, that's like the board of supervisors chairperson. They're not going to arrest the sheriff. And so for me, I needed Titus to have that level of power so that the fact that he's a Black man would both chastise some people and invigorate some people to come and challenge him. So I don't know if I could have did that story if he was the lead detective in a precinct in Brooklyn or, working for the city police department in Ferguson or something like that. For me, like you said, it's important. Setting is almost as important as character. It's almost equal because I'm writing about a part of the country that a lot of people don't know about. That a lot of people are not familiar with southeastern Virginia, with this side of going from central Virginia down to the Chesapeake Bay, down into what we call the lowlands. And so I think for me, setting is not only important thematically, but also aesthetically. Like I want you to feel like you're in summer in Virginia in the summer when the mosquitoes are flying around like they're driving Cadillacs. I want you to feel that. I want you to understand what it means to have a fall in Virginia where every day could be 65 degrees and you wake up on Saturday it's 90. You know, I need the setting. I need the fact that you have kids going to a school named after Confederate soldiers. I need all of that to affect you so that when you see the story, when you see Titus' story, you know that he's looking at everything through that sort of prism. So for me, like you said, the setting, if I move these books, I don't think they would be the books they ended up becoming. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, a real quick follow-up. In that way, does being from the South give you a sort of literary advantage that other artists don't have as authors? I mean, do you feel blessed to have come from this because you got to see up close?
Yeah,
something that other
both in a literary sense and in a social sense. So in a literary sense, it's incredible to be a writer from the South that I had access at an early age to books like Ernest J. Gaines. And my mother let me read The Color Purple when I was like 14. And so having that experience, I read all of Faulkner stuff before I went to high school because my grandmother had all those books. So that's in that way, a very literal sense, but also aesthetically, I grew up in a big family that was full of storytellers, you know, backyard orators and barbecue, you know, racketeers. My uncles would tell stories, my grandfathers, my aunts. I grew up in an environment that really embraced that rich oral tradition that is the South. And so I do think I'll say this and I'll let it go. If you read a book and it takes place in the South, you can very quickly realize whether the person was born in the South or they studied about the South. And you can tell very quickly and within probably 2 or 3 paragraphs. So thank you for the question.
Hi,
Hi.
thank you for coming.
Thank y'all for being here.
I have a specific question.
Okay, I have a specific answer.
So I read this before I knew you were coming to town. And it's a small part and it just struck me and I wanted to know, did you get this? Is this based off of something that's true?
Okay.
Or did you come up with it out of whole cloth?
Okay.
And I realized the only way I'm gonna figure this out is if I ask him, you know, and I got the chance, so it's really cool. It's about how the Sharon chapter of the DOC ended. And so it says the short and sweet version was that Sarah Ann Denning, the vice president of the local chapter, distressed that her husband, Norris Denning, had been charging his picket into many of her fellow revisionists, had made a sweet potato pie for the 1935 May Day UDC picnic. She used all the normal ingredients: pureed sweet potato, milk, nutmeg, butter, cinnamon. She'd also added one extra ingredient: 5 heaping tablespoons of laudanum.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess there's a part I don't understand, which is why she was distressed. Like, I don't understand what it means that her husband had been charging his picket into.
Oh, he been sleeping over. Yeah, you got it. You know what's funny? I'm so glad that you did that because for me, it is so grateful to see someone get the joke in real time. And I realize how good it is. It's such a good joke. And I'm glad that you're able to give me that and see it. And the look in your face right now is what I want everybody to read that.
So it has nothing to do with pickets.
Not at all. It's a play on biggest charge.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I love the question. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. So did this come out of your imagination? Like the herb poisoning?
Oh, the poison? Yeah, that's based on a legend from my hometown that somebody poisoned a bunch of people at a picnic. But there are people who say no, it wasn't poison. The ingredients had gone bad, but then it's like, That's the thing about small town crimes. A lot of times we always know who did it, but you can't prove it. That's why it's never who done it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was so funny because when you were asking it, I saw other people in the front row. They were like, they had already gotten it. So it's like, if they were waiting for you to get it, it was very funny. Thank you. Hi, how are you?
There's a part in your book, I did hear the part that you had picked out for him, I belong to a book club. I belong to a book club here in Richmond. We've been in the establishment since 1996. So we've been together for a very long time.
Wow.
And we were reading your book and I actually find a lot of the books because I'm an avid reader, right? But the piece that I think that really said a lot, because some of your stuff was similar to some things we had seen in real life.
Right.
Okay. But the part where when the guy kept asking you, why did you come back from the FBI? And then you were sitting on the porch talking to your brother about what happened.
Right. Oh, Titus was.
Can you tell them? Titus was, can you tell them, because to me, that's a very telling. It really made you humanistic. And it showed your morality of feeling guilty that you had to actually kill.
Well, I don't want to give too much away for anybody who hasn't read it.
Okay.
But I will say there's a scene where Titus is talking to his brother Marquise, and they love each other and they really care about each other. And their mother died when they were young, so they're very close, even though they don't seem like it at first. And he's telling Pops got away with doing things to them when they were young, and he became the thing that he didn't want to do. He became the very thing he was fighting against. And so it's this scene where he's telling his brother, it's like, I became the sheriff because I don't want anybody to ever get away with anything just because they're wearing a badge. And so for me, I wanted to tell that story because I wanted to show that Titus understands the unique position that he's in. And he understands how the law has not always been kind to people who look like him. And yet he ended up doing something very similar to the things he wanted to fight. And I think that made him realize how difficult being a good person, doing the right thing is. You know, my grandfather used to say that doing the right thing is rarely easy, always worth it, but it's rarely easy. I think that, like you asked that question, it shows that Titus understands it's not easy,
Right.
but he realized he has to do it because it's the right thing to do. So
Right.
thank you for the
That
question.
was the piece that I wanted you to, because I mean, that's my personal opinion, that you did a really good job of making him not just about the sheriff part, but a human being.
Thank
know?
you.
So.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate that. Thank you. Anybody else got? Oh, here we go.
Just a small question. Why did you choose Sharon for the name of the town, or the county?
So Sharon is also the name of the riverboat man in Greek mythology that takes you across the river Styx into the land of the dead. And I thought it would just make an interesting name for a town that is really living in the past, that is haunted by the dead who haven't really crossed that river. You know, every time you go past that old Rebel Joe statue, you're haunted by someone from the past that hasn't let go of this fatal, so to speak. And so that's kind of why I came up with the name. But now it's like they want me to write a sequel, and I never thought about it. So it's like I may have the sequel happen somewhere else. I don't know. So we'll see.
The other thing I wanted to say is that I've read all of your books, and I have been using all your references. You refer to Lehan and Hillier, and so my book list is now, I'm reading everything that you're recommending, and then they recommend other people. So
Yeah, I try not to ever steer you wrong. So
yeah.
I don't recommend the book
Thank
unless
you
I like
for all
it.
of that.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else got a question? Don't be shy. Oh, we got one. There we go.
Yeah, one or two more.
All right.
Hey, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the genesis of Rhythm of Time.
Oh yeah, so they called me back, oh god, it was like before the pandemic. And they were like, hey, Questlove read early galley of Black Hot Wasteland. And it was wondering if you want to talk to him about writing a book with him. I was like, oh wow, Questlove, of course, I'll talk to him. And I went to New York and I got to hang out with him. We had like a grown-up play date. It was fun. He's the nicest person in the world. He really is. He's very sweet. He's so interesting, so fun to talk to. And they had me do a thing. I had to do like an audition. So I had to write a scene based on like details that he had given me. And I was like up against some other writers, like big time writers. And then he liked the thing I wrote. And so then he came with somebody idea. And the way we worked on it was I would write 3 or 4 chapters based on notes and ideas he'd given me. Then I'd send it to him and he would say, okay, this worked, this don't work for me. He'd add his own notes. And we do that till we got to the end of the book. And then we did a whole edit. And then the book came out in April. And it came out really well, I think. The funny thing was me, as a crime writer, I think sometimes crime writers be lean on the fact that we're writing in a very violent, very unpredictable genre. So sometimes when things aren't going right in a book, I'll just have somebody get shot. It's like, Raymond Chandler said that when the story starts to lag, have somebody come through the door with a gun. And so I'll do that. I'll have somebody get hit in the face with a shovel and try to shake things up. And you can't really do that in a kid's book. So Can't really shoot these little kids in the face. So, you know, he want to. Yeah, you have a dinosaur. You know what's funny about the dinosaurs? So the book is a time travel book. It's about two kids who find a cell phone that's actually a time machine. So if you Google Philadelphia in 1997, it takes you there, right? And he ends up, one of the kids ends up going back to Philly in 1997 at the burgeoning of this Philadelphia hip hop scene. So, which is of course Bruce is a part of. And what happens is because he used the time machine, he starts ripping holes in time. So there's dodo birds running down Market Street. There's dinosaurs up by the Liberty Bell. And at one point he called me, Questlove called me like 4 o'clock in the morning. He was like in Japan doing something. He was like, Sean, it's a me. And I'm like, yeah, what's wrong? He's like, I think we need more dinosaurs. And I was like, this could have been an 8 o'clock call. I'm like, but he doesn't sleep. But he's really a nice guy to work with. We're working on something now, and he's really one of the coolest people. He really is. I'll tell y'all real quick. This doesn't have to be the last question because I'm running my mouth, but real quick. So I got to be on the Tonight Show with him, promoting the Rhythm of Time, right? So we go to the Tonight Show, and he's all like, "Are you nervous? Are you okay? We get ready to go on stage." I'm like, "I'm all right." And he says, "You know, I can get somebody to get you an edible or something if you want one." I'm like, no, thank you. I'd like to be able to talk. So. But he's so sweet and so nice and so cool. And the only thing I haven't gotten to do yet, he does these grown-up game nights. If you follow him on Twitter or on Instagram, you see it. That's the only thing I want to go to one of those. Like it looks so fun. They play giant Uno. They play Uno with these giant cards and stuff. And so I was like, why invited? Like I want to go. I want to play Uno with Trevor Noah. I mean, I can be cool. So anyway, I guess that's the last question. So thank y'all so much.
Yeah. Thank you both. Give it up for S.A. Cosby and Dale Brumfield, everybody. They will both be up in the lobby in a few minutes for a book signing. You can escape the auditorium now. And I will keep everyone in their seats by doing the raffle. So if you have the other half of your raffle ticket,